Okay, and we're live. We're late. My fault. Obviously, that it would have to be. And also, if you know the show, you know I'm not wearing the right necklace, which should show you how off of a day this is for me. But yeah, we're going to talk about language contact. I guess linguistics. Linguist reveals secrets of Middle English. Going with the more YouTube
Yes,
oriented title,
all the
but
secrets.
we're going to talk about language contact in Middle English and where all these words are coming from. Like everyone goes to England, and by everyone I mean 55 different ethnic groups and Scandinavians and Celts and
Yeah,
different waves of Indo-Europeans and then Romans, and there's just 45 different languages wearing a trench coat pretending to be one language that's now the franca, the standard of the entire world,
yeah,
which is insane.
it is weird.
So let's do it.
Okay,
What's up?
cool.
What's
Yo,
your thing?
thanks for having me back. And
Thanks
hello,
for coming.
everyone. Yeah, by the way, first off, Merry Christmas and Happy St. Stephen's Day. Good King Wenceslas is walking around in snow, but his feet are full of the warmth of the Lord, and so he's not freezing.
I
If
have
anyone
no
knows
idea
that
what you're
carol.
talking about, but I like it.
Okay, it's good King Wenceslas. It's a famous older English carol. So Merry Christmas to everyone. Hope everyone had a good Christmas. I hope you, Sam, had a good Christmas. I hope it
Oh,
was.
I had a fantastic Christmas. I love Christmas. It's my favorite holiday. I look forward to it every year. No, I hate Christmas. But that's okay. We don't need to talk about how I hate Christmas.
Okay. Well,
Elvis Dallas. Thank you for your support, by the way, Elvis. But do you know anything about this, by the way?
me, no. Yeah,
Richard
sorry.
Bandler and Tad James, Modern English Construction. I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that. I do not know everything. So yeah.
I thought you did, at least
Oh
about
wow.
linguistics.
Yeah, well, PhDs are as well. That's a whole other topic for another day. What does a PhD really mean, man? Not what you think. As we got into that thread, the fight, whatever it was a few weeks ago. With
Right,
yeah,
right. I mean,
yeah,
for anyone who doesn't know, like PhDs do highly specialized research. So it's like just no just having a PhD in a specific field doesn't mean you know other things about that field. In fact, it means you might not know other things about that field because you're so specialized in whatever specific research you are, because it's doing actual research, which
yeah.
I'm not interested as much in. Sometimes I call PhDs my data monkeys because they give me stuff to actually draw conclusions from.
We're useful for that.
Yeah, it's one thing useful for. I like PhDs. Obviously, I have a lot on the show. But obviously, if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I also am known to criticize them.
Well, when you have a PhD and then yeah, Boxing Day. Yes, yes. Happy Boxing Day.
Yeah, and that's an English flag. It's coming through as just a black flag, but it is an English flag actually on
Yes.
YouTube.
Go do pugilism. Boxing Day. Anyhow, stupid joke. Yeah.
What's
You
up,
know,
D503?
it's interesting because yeah. Anyhow, when you yourself are a PhD and you criticize the whole PhD process, that really ticks people off. So I love to do that on Twitter.
Oh, you're attacking your own
And how
field.
dare I?
How dare you join the enemy, the alternative people who dare to think about things when not holding the correct scrap of paper?
Yes. How dare I? In any case, in the true spirit of perhaps not being overly siloed, yeah, most of what most of what we're talking about today is not technically what my PhD is in, but that's okay because I like to do a lot of reading and a lot of research outside my wheelhouse. And I do have a background in language contact and in historical linguistics, and so while Middle English was not what I spent 6 years writing about. I love Middle English. I think Middle English is one of the most interesting periods in the history of English. I think it's really, I think it's good and correct to enjoy something like a Beowulf in Old English. Old English is amazing, and early modern English gives us Shakespeare and Marlowe and the King James Bible and just beautiful works like that. But Middle English is kind of this. Well, it's middle. It's a liminal stage in the history of our language, and a lot of the stuff that we now have in modern English kind of starts or is beginning to start in this period. So I think it's a
So,
fun.
so what is
fun
Middle English though?
yeah, I mean maybe that's the better. Thank you for drawing me out of the Spurg spiral for 2 seconds.
That is very literally what I'm here for. That is my
Yeah,
whole thing.
yeah.
That is what I do.
So I guess I'll try to do this as quickly as I can. Periodization is a whole thing in historical linguistics. So languages change over time. There is no language that is spoken today that has not changed over time, I guess.
Right.
As
Language is culture. Culture is dynamic.
it's
It means
dynamic,
it's
it's
always changing.
shifting. Yeah. As I like to say, the only languages that have stopped changing over time are those that have died. So they are now
Good way to
dead.
put it.
Yeah, and so they've stopped changing because they're dead. So English, obviously, still alive. We're speaking it right now. This is the meta moment where we realize it's a dream in a dream. Oh my gosh, yeah, Inception. We are speaking the language we're talking about. So English has, you know, linguists debate, and I'm not going to get into that debate about when different periods in a language's history start and when they stop, and it's a whole thing that two people on the planet care about, and they throw insults at each other at conferences. But so in the history of English, we have what we call quote unquote Old English. Then we have what we call quote unquote Middle English, what we'll get into today. And then we have what we call quote unquote early modern English and then modern English. So that's usually how linguists, break up the history of the development of the English language.
And then there's different dialects even within that. That would be
Within
like
those
standard
periods,
English, and then you
yeah,
have American, Australian English.
yes. In the case of modern English, we have various regional standards. So Canadian standard, American standard, British standard, Irish standard, Australian standard, Kiwi standard, South African standard, and those are more or less similar, but they have some differences within those standard forms. You have, or like let's say, running in the background behind those standard forms, you have all what we would call like actual English dialects, the way people actually speak it, which is not the same thing as a standard language. So that's kind of more or less how it stands today. When you go in the past, and hopefully we'll have some time to get into that today, as a general rule, the farther back in time in the history of English you go, the more I'll put it in scare quotes, Chris Farley style, messy things get, because anytime you go anytime before there was a standard English, people kind of just spoke the language, and particularly before most people were literate, the you know when somebody would write English down, they would more or less, to a certain extent, write it how they spoke it.
Yeah,
It wasn't,
this is being
yeah,
talked about in the comments right now in
yeah.
Dice.
Yeah, spelling is, well, they spoke it. Yeah, the whole spelling thing is complex too, because it was sort of an interplay between a regional standard spelling plus how that writer wrote it himself, and so it's this whole complex thing. But like the vast majority, hat tip to TLE, the vast majority of speakers were illiterate. I mean, that's my
Right.
ancestors are illiterate. So my family, part of my family hails from the Cheshire region of England, and so that's actually, if anyone's read Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, that is probably something close to our ancestral dialect. They were illiterate farmers, and so they just spoke the language however they learned it. And there wasn't, nobody, if you weren't going to school and learning how to quote unquote spell English, there was no real input from the written word on the way you spoke. And as such, there tended to be far more differences between dialects of English. And so we'll get into this today. In the Middle English period, you really see this sharp distinction between different dialects of English. So much so that it almost gets to the point of like, is this one language or is this multiple languages that we call English? Because again, it's difficult for us. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's difficult for us as moderns, as modern English speakers, who have, I'm assuming, for the vast majority of us here, have learned to read and write English in probably some sort of public or private school setting.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to imagine a time where English wasn't really written down.
A larger portion of the audience, by the way, doesn't speak English as a first language. It's like the U.S. is only like 42% of my audience, and then a big chunk of the rest is Canadian,
Right.
Australian, and
But
British. But
but
it's
even
probably
then,
like 20-30% is from other countries.
right. But even if you learn English as a second language,
Oh, okay.
you've learned English in this when it's been standardized. You've learned either British Standard or American Standard or some sort of cross, regional standard form of English. It's it's really difficult, I think, for any modern person to imagine learning a language that hasn't been written down. Now, if you do,
Yeah,
we've
right.
talked about this on a previous live stream. If you go do field work in a endangered language that hasn't ever really been written down or not written down much, so I like linguists who go work on Native American languages run into this. Linguists who go to like the Amazon and record and work with languages down there run into this. You know, linguists who work in places like Papua New Guinea run into this, where there are languages on planet Earth that don't have a written form yet. That then you kind of,
Right.
if you read even just the work of those linguists, you start to kind of grasp what it is when a language hasn't been written down yet. We can sort of roughly transpose that kind of mindset onto the Middle Ages, and you get something that kind of works for English. English was a language that was spoken by many people, but it was for a good chunk of time in the Middle Ages in England wasn't the primary spoken language. It
So, but
or not spoken, written. It wasn't the primary written language. Apologies. It
right, the
wasn't really the written
language
form.
would probably be French, right?
It would be Latin or French.
Okay.
It
Right.
would be Latin or French. And so you had this complex thing where English speakers, or let's say speakers of earlier forms of English, such as, you know, let's say for our purposes, a Middle English dialect, if they were going to be educated, they would, if they were going to be well educated, they would be able to, they would read and speak Latin, which was a language that was spoken throughout and written throughout Europe, but was no one's native language because it had already died.
Right.
And
So that
then
would be the lingua franca
that
of
would be
Europe
like
at the
the
time.
real lingua franca would be Latin in the western part of Europe. And then within England, if you were going to be involved in any sort of commerce, like high level commerce, particularly that involved some sort of elites, you would need to have learned Norman French
Mm,
in
okay.
order to communicate with like the hoity-toities. The
Even into
fancy.
the 1400s?
Um, well, well, this is the tricky thing about periodization. So just to maybe finish that point up,
Okay,
you know,
sorry.
it's easy to say Old English, Middle English, Early Modern English. It's not like there was a switch flipped one day and all of a sudden everyone in England went, oh, now we are speaking Middle English and we no
Right.
longer right. It's like these are all sort of this is modern linguists looking at the past and trying to figure out, you know, at what how the language has changed over time. Old English is, let's say, goes from circa 800 to around to basically to the Norman conquest. Some people would say it goes from 700 to the Norman conquest. Fine, 7 to 800 to the Norman conquest. So, 1066, you know, you have Battle of Hastings. This is commonly seen as one of the final thing, you know, Jenga blocks to be pulled out of Anglo-Saxon England, and where you have this, you know, Norman conquest, and you have Danes coming in from the north. We'll get into this in 2 seconds. Really with the Norman conquest, but really starting before that too, you have some significant changes in the language that produce Middle English. So Middle English is commonly, you know, the periodization for Middle English commonly goes from something like 11 or 1200 through like 1500, 1600, depending where you were in England and depending on who you talk to, because some people have strong opinions about this, which again, I don't really care
Yeah,
that
it's hard
much.
to put a hard line in when it's a
Yeah,
gradual shift, though.
it's
Although
gradual shifts.
it's non-arbitrary when you have the Norman invasion. There's lots of language contact there.
Yes, yes, and I mean, and there was, you know, Latin was spoken in Anglo-Saxon England by clergy, in particular. Um,
Really?
oh yeah,
Oh,
oh yeah,
didn't know that.
yeah. So, oh yeah, like so there was already Latin loanwords being, you know, borrowed into Old English. We there's many of these. So, but but they tended to be, you know, Latin influence in Old English was very like narrowly sort of it had to do, you know, if it was a church term, if it was a religious term, you tended to get Latin loans. But the vast majority of the words in the English language pre-Norman invasion were more or less quote unquote native English words. With the Norman invasion, you get essentially English is still spoken, but it's no longer the elite language. You know, so imagine if all of a sudden people started, like, you know, in the American context, I guess, what if like Elon just was like, okay, now we're going to be speaking, I don't know, the new language of Twitter is going to be Polish. And all of a sudden, everyone's like, "Oh, you got to learn Polish." Oh, Polish is what the fancy people are speaking. So like, everyone just starts learning Polish for some reason, and you're like, "Wait, but I'm still going to speak English." Yeah, you're still going to speak English, but do you want to interact with, you know, upper echelons of culture? Well, then you're going to need to learn Polish. There would probably, if that, this is a totally bananas example that will never happen, but and God bless all the Poles. But if that were to happen, there would be some Polish influence in the way we spoke English in America, right? In this bizarro world version. That's essentially kind of what happened in England. You had even peasants, right, who didn't speak Norman French would start to, there would be a trickle down effect, at
Right.
least in terms,
Hierarchical diffusion would be the
yeah,
term in anthropology. It's
yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
really
It's
apply here, but
in linguistics we would talk about prestige, the prestige variety or prestige language, right?
right.
Ceased
But the
to
way
be
that it would
English.
go down
Yeah,
to the upper and middle classes would be through hierarchical diffusion.
yeah. So it's oftentimes I hear this, and it's not totally a myth, but it's somewhat inaccurate. That well, the Norman invasion is why English changed in the Middle English period. I mean, to a certain extent, the Normans sure gave us a lot of new words. So a lot of new lexical items, a lot of new vocabulary terms, and so everyone look. These are common examples to point out, so I'll point them out. You get this weird split, particularly in culinary terms, where when the animal is alive, it's the Anglo-Saxon term, and when the animal has been prepared to eat, it's the Norman French version. So this is the
Yeah,
pig
that
pork.
example has been done to death.
I know cow
Yeah.
beef, but I mean, it's there. Um, we yeah, I'm so stoned right now, man.
No.
Yeah,
Neither of us are stoned.
yeah.
I
I
promise.
don't. It's the Pacific Northwest dialect. Okay, I respect my dialect.
Oh, that's true, right? Pacific Northwest,
Pacific
British
Northwest,
Columbia,
man.
Washington, Oregon are they just talk like they're always stoned.
We're
Is
just
the entire
perpetually
region
stoned because of the
is
degenerate
stoned.
smoking pot outside our windows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
Um.
I don't know what's going on. We have a lot of English people in the comments. I think we caught them right at the end of work in Greenwich Mean Time.
Oh yes.
Uh,
Yes.
but that's all right.
That's
Welcome.
good. Welcome. Yes. So there's like a lot of new vocabulary items that come into English because of the Normans, and I don't really have a strong opinion about the Normans. It is what it is, man. They invaded, man. It happened. I'm not going to ask for reparations or anything like that. But really, a lot of what changed English during the Middle English period is not really the Normans, because again they were there and they're ruling, but really they were kind of they would maybe learn English to a certain level, and after a few generations they would end up speaking both languages fluently, right? If you were from a Norman family, you would speak Norman French and then English. You would
Right.
need to speak both, right? You would be essentially fully bilingual after a relatively short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So the Norman influence on English is like it's there. You can feel it, but it didn't like change the structure of our language so much. What changed the structure of English quite drastically in the Middle English period is actually the Vikings. They exerted a much bigger influence on our language than the Normans did.
Yes,
So,
and on my genetics.
well, I mean, you're Irish, right?
Yeah, my family's from Leinster, which is
Okay.
where Dublin is. So
Oh
yeah, I
yeah,
think that's
Dublin was
why
a
I look
Viking.
like this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I anyhow, yeah. So the Vikings, we'll call them Danes to be more exact. The Danes invaded England actually and started. I don't want to call it colonization because that's a very modern term. They
Right.
definitely invaded, took over, and settled whole areas of what is today northern England.
Yeah,
And this,
I
yeah,
think it matches pretty much settler colonialism, right? Aren't they putting
it's more settly.
themselves?
It's more settly. Yeah, it's not so like Dutch Spice Empire kind of colonialism. It's a little bit
Right.
more. Yeah, it's a more like we're gonna move in and live here kind of.
But were they moving in to place themselves in the like elite positions, or are they creating
In those
whole
areas.
communities?
In
Yeah.
those
Okay.
areas, yeah, I can send you. I'll just if you want to put it, I'll just send it in the Twitter chat here. So they established what's commonly called the Dane Law, because it was an area where the Danish, aka Vikings, the Danes, like dictated the law essentially.
Right.
Um, Dane
And
law,
they did not take Scotland. Sophia's correct.
yeah, uh, you know, the Dane law it had somewhat movable borders. It was a little tricky, but obviously, I mean, I guess you could say roughly modern day Northumbria ish, with spreading out and around and stuff like that, and it kind of shifted around. But in what is effectively modern northern England,
Right.
you have a fair amount
The
of,
North.
yeah, in the north, as the king in the north. Um, uh, all the love to Yorkshire, but your R's are weird. Just saying. In the North, you have a fair amount of usually Danish men moving in and and just living, taking over living. Um, and it wasn't like the Danes came in and killed everyone. That would have been stupid to do. Who's going to farm? Who's going to do anything if you could just go in and kill people? That's
Right.
ridiculous, right? You want to establish control over an area. So what happened is a lot of Danish speaking, so we'll say Norse, Old Norse speaking, yeah, no.
Okay. Sorry, continue. I had to.
Brilliant, brilliant as it's brilliant. Um, a lot of Danish speaking Vikings moved in and had to talk to people. And they didn't, it wasn't just like, oh, we're going to move in and just hang out here. I mean, they took English wives usually, because it was mostly men who were moving in and taking over. And so now you had a fair amount of mixed marriages. So let's say multilingual family situations where you have a native speaker of Old Norse living in a family with a native speaker of probably Northumbrian dialect English, an earlier stage of Northumbrian dialect English, or maybe just broadly one of the many northern dialects of English, living together. This can make for kind of an interesting situation where, particularly when you have kids, because there's kids being born into a multilingual situation. And the kids, and there's a lot of obviously we don't have this kind of research from the Middle Ages, but we can look at multilingual families nowadays and sort of extrapolate backwards and see how that must, make some educated guesses about how this would have been. A sort of low-hanging fruit example from the American context is Spanish-English bilingual families.
Yeah.
It is a pretty easy correlation to look at, and obviously the
And
cultures.
probably the most common
It's probably the
by
most
in order of
common.
magnitude.
Yeah. No, I'm not. I don't come from one of these backgrounds. Even though Twitter sometimes seems to think I'm Latino, which is I love Latinos, but I don't know why Twitter thinks this. Sometimes I get.
I thought you were Latino for the first few months. Well, I thought you were part Filipino, which is Latino, but kind of.
Ish. It's my family's Filipino. Yeah.
Right.
So, but like if you look at or if you talk to people, I mean, I love talking to bilingual. I love all the bilingual Latinos. They're great to talk to. Because I always, when I get to know somebody who comes from a family background like that, I always ask, now how much English versus Spanish do you speak when you're together with your family? What does code switching look like? So in a mixed language family, I don't know, maybe some of the listeners have had experience with this. It can get kind of weird in a fun way, but like kind of like somewhat chaotic, right? Like if you have maybe like grandparents living with you who don't speak maybe one language, but then you have little grandkids who only speak the other language, and then you have the intervening sort of generations. You can it gets goofy, it gets a little strange. What language do we speak when? How do we sort of mitigate this in the family? All that's very fascinating. On a broader scale, sort of zooming out, when you have two languages spoken side by side, there's going to be like guaranteed contact. There's going to be changes that happen to both languages. In the context of medieval northern England, where you have Norse living alongside English, over basically a few generations, the Norse slowly dwindles, right? Because Danes effectively stop coming. There's a sort of initial waves of Danish settlement, and then there's a lot of inculturation where the Danes effectively kind of become Northern English, and then the Danes more or less. I mean, there's still some raids and there's still some Viking raids and all that kind of stuff happening, but there's not this mass. The settlement effectively slows down. So what happens is you have these mixed families where children would be learning both languages. But I think I've used this example before. Yeah. Well, there's an initial grunt stage, and then there's like a we need to learn how to talk to each other stage. And
Right.
the learn to talk to each other stage in language contact for many linguists is the most fascinating because that's where you see some significant shifts happen. Um, so I've used this example before. You, Sam, I can't. Have you learned another language before? Have you tried your hand at a second language?
I mean, I speak passable Spanish,
Okay. Yeah, a good
kind
example.
of, sometimes.
Yeah, my Spanish is not great. I speak what I like to call restaurant Spanish, wherein I know a lot of like culinary nouns, but I don't really know how to conjugate my verbs properly, and it makes for very hilarious interactions sometimes.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I'm sure I sound ridiculous
oh
speaking
yeah,
Spanish, but I can order food and beer.
yeah. You have a very limited grasp of the Spanish language. It's not your native language, and
No, and
let's
I'm
say
not fluent.
hypothetically, you're not fluent in it. Hypothetically, if you were to be around it more, maybe in situations where you had to speak Spanish, your Spanish would probably improve just
Yeah,
because you're using it more. But you would probably always somewhat be, you would always be, because you're older, you're not a child anymore. You would always be speaking Spanish via English,
mm,
right? You would have
right.
that English frame that you would have to be then working maybe against continually, and it would totally affect the way you spoke Spanish. So for me, I mean, this is pretty standard. Anytime anyone who's had to learn a second language knows this. Man, it's hard to learn a second language, particularly as an adult. This is really hard, right? The sounds are different, the grammar is different. So for
Yeah.
me, I mean, of all my foreign languages that are still living and not dead, the one I do the best is German. So I speak very good German.
Yeah, and it's relatively easy for English speakers compared to other languages to learn German.
Well, I mean, yes.
Is there an easier language
Oh, for
besides
sure.
Dutch or Frisian for an English speaker
Oh,
to learn?
well, I would say Norwegian. Jag kan också snacka norsk. So Norwegian's probably super, super easy. Yeah, Welsh is a whole other world.
Yeah,
Kreisel.
any Celtic language
Yeah,
is
that's what
crazy.
I know. Kreisel.
I know a few
Uh,
words in Irish Gaelic, but
yeah,
not a lot. Like some cultural things that I just know.
yeah. But like, so even for me, right? Like, so I have like 15 years experience in learning and speaking German. I can read Heidegger in the original. I can read Kafka in the original. I can talk about those things in the original with Germans, with German speakers. I've even like learned somewhat of something of two other German non-standard dialects. I have all this German knowledge. Ich kann ja fließend Deutsch. But I will always sound a little strange in German, no matter how good my German gets, and it's always improved. You can tell that I'm a non native speaker of German, right? I'm always somewhat constrained. I sometimes have to look up certain specific vocabulary items. I will, if I'm not thinking, if I'm tired, I might make a few grammatical mistakes along the way, right? This is
Hmm.
pretty normal when you learn a language as an adult. So, what happened was you had a lot of Danish men, and men do, by and large, tend to be a little bit worse at learning foreign languages. This has actually been somewhat proven. Women tend to be better at learning languages than men
Hmm.
on average. On average.
Women
Um,
also speak more
More. They
words
speak more.
daily on
Yes,
average,
they
right?
do. And that's part of it. Yeah.
Hmm.
You have a lot of Danish men basically learning enough English to make themselves understood, and you have enough Northern English learning enough Danish to make themselves understood. Then you have these mixed marriages. Children are basically born learning both languages, but then also speaking English via this Danish filter.
Right.
This resulted in a huge amount of changes to the structure of at least northern dialects of English. Over time, those northern, sort of, let's say, Danish influenced versions of English got popular by diffusion, linguistic diffusion at least, from
Right.
north to south.
And
Um,
diffusion is just when culture or language, which is part of culture, spreads out to different people and areas.
so
Really, just people.
yeah, so I think maybe this is a whole complex thing that we could talk. I've already talked for like 30 minutes about this. So to move on, as Monty Python would say, get on with it. Um, the I think one of the best ways we can look at this, because it's something that really did change in the Norse contact really changed the pronoun system of English. And so pronouns are a thing that people love to talk about these days. We have we're under this false idea that we can choose our own pronouns, which is just not how languages work, by the way. You don't get to choose your own pronouns. That's not how it
Yeah.
works. It just is not. Anyone who tells you that, particularly who claims to be a linguist, is just lying to you. I
You
could
also don't
totally.
get your own prepositions.
You don't get your own prepositions. You don't. That's not how languages work. So if you want to pull up, let me send it to you here. Let me make sure I'm sending you the correct one. 1 second. Sorry. I have probably too many windows open. If I'll just send you the wiki article here on Old English grammar. So this is like early English.
Okay. Yeah. And
And
in
it,
the meantime,
yeah.
on this, while you're sending that to
Mm-hmm.
me, just, kids in Wales have to learn now with English too. They have to speak it. This is something that's happening like across most of the world. Like somebody in the comments, D503, who's from Mexico, he's talking about with the Maya. I know, I like, if you watch the channel, I really like studying the Maya, and I've been to the Mayan regions of Mexico several times. And this is true there. This is happening in a lot of places that have these traditional languages. Not all of them, of course, because there's so many traditional languages or dialects, Aquitaine and Normandy and Brittany and Wales and Ireland and Scotland. Scotland has Scottish Gaelic and they have Scots, which is
Yep.
like their own. It's a different thing. It's
Yeah. Scots is its own language, which will piss people off, but I'm saying it. I'm declaring it. Scots is
yeah,
its own language.
it's not gonna piss anyone in the comments off, but it would piss off linguists.
Yeah.
Are you you're sending this to me on
I
Twitter, I
just sent you
assume?
on Twitter if that's easiest. Yeah.
But this is happening, and then they're learning it from a younger age. It's also happening with Native American groups who are retaking languages, and I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. No, I mean,
I think
more
it's a good
languages
thing,
will never hurt you.
right?
More languages will never hurt you. Yeah. It will only help
But
you.
it's mandated in schools now in the Mayan regions of Mexico. Correct me if I'm wrong or on something here, D503, but I think that in a lot of schools it's mandated for them in the Mayan regions to be teaching there's multiple Mayan languages, but a Mayan language in a lot of places.
So if you just want to keyword search personal pronouns, because it's a long, we just want that little table there. If you want to,
Yeah, I got it.
you got it. Okay. So this is what the pronoun system of Old English used to look like. So let me define pronouns because I want to make sure that people are following me. So a pronoun is a kind of word. It's a class of word that stands in for a noun. So it comes from Latin pronomen
Hmm.
for the noun or for the name of the thing. Yeah. So, right, like in English, modern English, we have, in terms of personal pronouns, if you're the subject of a sentence, we have I, you, he, she, it, we, you, or you all, y'all, yous guys, yins, you lot, whatever, what use, and then they. So those are modern English personal pronouns. Um, in earlier stages of English, they looked a little different, and sometimes were just different words, which is fascinating because pronouns are kind of a core part of a language, right? Not every language on planet Earth has pronouns, but if a language does have pronouns, which English most certainly does, pronouns tend to be more or less fixed. It doesn't mean that they won't change over time. The pronunciation might change over time, but the core part of the word itself rarely changes. What happened between Old English, which we're looking at right here, and Middle English is actually some of our pronouns in English were just replaced with something else. This is not super common. When this does happen, it usually means that there was some intense level of language contact.
Yeah,
Um,
because these are the words you say the most
they're
commonly, so it's
super
weird
common.
to change them.
Yeah, they're what's called high frequency words, and as a general rule, the higher frequency a word is, the less likely it is to change because it just gets reinforced over and over and over and over again. Like you cannot speak modern English without using pronouns. You wouldn't be able to make yourself understood. It would be very difficult. You have to use pronouns.
Hmm.
Um, So in Old English, we can see here, just looking at we'll just stick with the nominative because this whole case distinction thing is going to get really confusing. So these are the subject pronouns. You had first person singular. So in modern English, it would be I, ich. In at least this is probably West. This looks like West Saxon dialect Old English. So ich. You had a first person dual. So two of us, or we two, would be wit.
That's so annoying.
Well, it's useful to have duals. Right? You have two hands, you have two eyes, you have two people. Duals are kind of normal, actually, for a lot of older Indo-European languages. Then you had first person's plural, we. So where we get English, modern English, we, we. Okay. Then you had second person singular.
And that's
Thu.
like you.
Well, thu, and it's actually where we get what's what thou. It becomes thou.
Okay.
So this was a second person singular. Yeah. Thu. Then you had a second person dual, yit. And then you had a second person plural, ye, which is where we get ye, as in hear ye, hear ye. This kind of
Oh, okay.
older thing. Yeah. Okay. So ich wit we, thu yit ye. It kind of rhymes almost if you say it like that. Then we had our third persons. So, and this is actually where some of the biggest change happens in the Middle English period. So, coming from this Old English, in 2 seconds, we're going to show, we'll see how this shifted in Middle English. So, you had he, which became, you had he, which became he. So, that's third person, masculine singular, a single masculine / male person who's kind of away from both speakers. So, third person, masculine, singular. Then you had third person neuter singular, and that was hit. Hit becomes it. So the modern English word it used to be, in the earliest recorded version of our language, hit. It had an H there. And actually, some dialects in America, at least historically, had an H there. I'm thinking particularly of Appalachian English.
Nice. My favorite.
Appalachian English.
One of my favorite accents.
Yeah, had hit. You would hear that, or at least see that, even into the Civil War period. There were, if anyone knows, does anyone know? Do you ever heard of Ambrose Bierce?
I'm not sure.
Bierce. Yeah, I think it's Bierce. Yeah, Bierce wrote. I think it's in his. Was it Bierce? I think it is Bierce. Bierce was a novelist, a sort of a American novelist who fought in Civil War, and some of his dialogue, if they're in regions that are Appalachian, reflect this. They put in H's. He puts in H's. Anyhow, so even into the 1800s, there were parts of American English that still pronounced that H there, which is kind of cool.
And just so everyone knows who's not familiar with Appalachia, it's the mountain region in the East Coast U.S. that was traditionally settled by Scots-Irish people.
Yeah. And because it was so mountainous, it preserved older forms.
Right.
Because
people kind of went in there and stayed
Yeah.
and just bred with each other and Native Americans. And not a lot of people went in there. It's been very insular for hundreds of years. Yeah. Middle Mexico. Sweet.
Yeah.
Gloucester. Is it Gloucester or Glauca? I don't know how to pronounce it. Those things are
Oh, how the language changes. Yeah.
Well, yeah, how it's pronounced, because it's like Worcester and then the Thames and not the Thames, but we have New London and Connecticut and we call it the Thames and whatever.
Yeah. It's
Gloucester. Okay.
Gloucester. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. Okay, so he hit. He becomes he, hit becomes it. And then, so if you think of modern English, what's our third person singular feminine pronoun in modern English? She.
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 I was thinking second person. Okay.
Nope. Yeah. She.
Or no. Yeah, that is second person.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
She is third person. Yeah. So, but look at what it is in Old English. It's hail.
How the hell do you get that?
Well, we'll get into that today. Basically, because Vikings, but in a cool way that we'll talk about in a little bit here. Yeah. And then look at the third person plural nominative pronoun in Old English. Hie. What is the third person plural pronoun in modern English? They. So he is not they.
We used to have masculine and feminine for third person singular. That's
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah, because English used to have grammatical gender like modern German.
No way.
Yeah,
Well, no, that makes perfect sense.
every
But
single
yeah,
one, every single noun in the English language used to have belong to one of three grammatical categories, which we call gender: masculine, neuter, feminine. So it's, if anyone here speaks German, it's just like it was basically more or less like German today.
mm,
Um, so so English in its earliest recorded stages had all of these things. It had dual pronouns. Sometimes it had a fully fleshed out gender system in the third person. It had all this stuff. Let's look and see what happens in the Middle English period, because all of a sudden things are going to look very, very different, and dare I say, maybe more simple, but also more chaotic. Let me send you the link here. When linguists say simple, we mean it with like a big asterisk.
yeah, of course.
It's
It's
like
always
not simple in the
complicated.
way that most people would think of. Yeah. Okay, so if you want to keyword search pronouns, just because it's a big, there's a big table of the Middle English personal pronouns.
Personal
Yeah, I'm sorry,
pronouns.
personal pronouns. If you just keep, yeah, there it is right there. Okay, so Middle English period. So again, roughly 1100, 1200 through roughly 1500, 1600, depending on who you talk to. This is what happens. So this is the personal pronoun system. So something has occurred, and let's look at maybe what has occurred. So if you look at just at the subject pronouns, you have first person, and it could have been, depending on where you were in English, or English in England, you would
Hmm.
have ik, ich, or e, depending on where you were. Second person subject, though, or thou, sometimes tu, sometimes theo, and sometimes you. The masculine pronouns, hey. Oh, that sounds a lot like the Old English hey. Yeah, it does. So that one stayed the same. But look at what happened to the feminine. Remember that Old English, the feminine pronoun was heyo. And what has it become in Middle English? Sometimes she, sometimes sheo, sometimes scho, sometimes yo, depending on where you were. The neuter pronoun stays the same as Old English, hit. Okay, so the thing that really has shifted here is the she. The she pronoun. Where does this come from? It used to be heo, now it's sheo or sho sometimes, depending on where you were in English-speaking world. Okay, that's weird, right? Linguists want to figure that out. We want to figure out what the hell happened with that, because that's weird. Okay, looking briefly at the plural pronouns, we have first person plural, we. Okay, that's more or less the same as the old English form. And note that the dual forms have completely dropped away. The dual forms were probably already on their way out even when people were writing down Old English, so they're kind of trickling away, because you don't really need a dual form. You don't need a we two or a you two kind of pronoun. You don't need it, right? It's not absolutely necessary. Second person plural, ye, and this is where we get like the hear ye form, ye, yeah.
Hmm.
But then look at the third person plural. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. Okay, so you had competing forms. So from Old English, do you see that bit right there? From Old English, in some places, the way you said they was heyo or hey. Okay, that's a little confusing because that's also the same pronoun as he. So in some regions of England, hey could mean he or they. That's a little confusing. Now you can make it work because the verbs will let you know usually, but it is a little tricky, right? When you have two pronouns that can mean the same thing. And if anyone here speaks German, modern German, you know what I mean. Sie. What does sie mean? In modern German, sie can mean all kinds of things based on context. So Middle English had an analogous situation where you had some confusion in the pronouns. Okay, so some regions of England had this older heyo or hey form, but the problem is it sounded almost exactly like the word for he. That's not ideal. It's not ideal, right, to have confusion in pronouns. Again, you don't get to pick your own pronouns. Languages have pronominal systems for a reason, and you don't get to just choose whatever you want. I'm
Yeah,
sorry to
well,
say to people.
they're
Yeah,
destroying everything else about the culture. Why would
yeah,
they not destroy something as simple as pronouns?
yeah. So so some regions of England had a heo or a hey form for they, but look at the other box there from Old Norse. The regions of England.
Dude, I don't even know how to read. I don't know what this letter is.
Okay, so that's a thorn that makes a th sound.
Oh. Okay, well, that's
Yeah,
easy.
yeah. So that letter comes from the runic alphabet. When the English were Christianized, the missionaries didn't know how to spell the th sound, so they just borrowed in the thorn
Hmm.
because the Latin alphabet is not really designed to write a Germanic language, so they just borrowed that in.
It's
Anyway,
like the coolest aesthetically, at
it
least.
looks very metal. It looks very like it looks very like immigrant song. Led Zeppelin. Like it's very Viking. It has this like ancient northern feel to it. Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
cool. In any case, but the other regions of England just took in the Norse pronoun.
And this is still pre 1066, pre
This is pre.
Hardrada.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is leading up to the Norman invasion. So even this is what I'm saying is, yeah, the Normans changed their language, but in the areas that had significant contact with Vikings, the language was already changing.
Right.
Yeah, it was already happening. So so starting in the northern part of England, you had these forms that were just plucked from the Norse. You had either tha or the or theo or tho, and this is where we get the modern word they. So in Old Norse, the pronoun for they was their, and it is in modern Icelandic as well. So you could ask yourself, well, if pronouns are such a integral part of a language, why would English speakers even be willing to borrow in a completely foreign pronoun? Well, mixed let's say lots of bilingualism, at least for a while. Lots of bilingualism in the north, and then you had, even as the Danes. I know it's very tricky. Thank you, Jude. It's very tricky to yes. There's all these exceptions to the rules in English. Uh, so you had a while you had a fair amount of bilingualism, or let's say you had a lot of Danes trying to speak English and not doing it too well. They spoke kind of blunted English. They couldn't really grasp it. Um, but then you also had this confusing thing that was happening in English where the word hey could mean he, it could mean they, and in actually certain regions of England, hey could mean he, she, or they. It could be all three.
Okay.
And
That's not very specific.
that's
I don't
not
know
very
why that
specific.
would, yeah.
And again, the purpose of having pronouns is to make your life easier, not make it harder, right? The purpose of having pronouns is they're basically shortcuts. They're
Well,
linguistic shortcuts.
when you have no problems in life, you have to make some up.
Yeah. So 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 the reason why in some regions of England, it wasn't like anyone wanted this to happen. The vowels shifted because remember that in Old English the word for he was hey, the word for she was heo, and the word for they was hie. They all started with h, but what happened is the vowels started moving. So certain parts of England, the a, the ao, and the ie all became and that was hey hey hey. Okay, that's really confusing, right? Like having three pronouns that pronounce the same but mean three different things is not ideal. Again, modern German is doing fine with it, and that's okay. God bless the Germans for trying. They're so stubborn they just haven't bothered to change it, nor will they change it. But I like to think the enterprising English peasants in my past kind of were like, okay, this is too much. We have to simplify this out.
Right. Let's
So
simplify everything.
let's
You're throwing
simplify
a lot of
everything.
examples out, which is great, but
Yeah.
let's get to the bigger picture.
Yeah. So what we do is we just take pronouns from the Norse because the Norse have figured this out. The Norse just substitute their own pronouns,
So are you saying it was an active choice then?
more or less, to a certain extent.
Okay.
It started in the North and then diffused through the rest of the language.
Got it. Okay. So it happened in the North, and then other people decided this is an easier way to speak, either consciously or subconsciously. So they just started doing it.
Yeah. So if you want to, let me see. I sent you a couple things in the past, or in the past couple days here. And again, sorry, I know that this is deep and little in the weeds, but this is where you have to go sometimes. Let me just 1 second here. All right. I resent this to you. If you could just pop that up on screen.
Uh, oh, okay. Doesn't work like.
Oh, does it not work like that?
It's okay. I found it.
Yeah.
This image is what you're
Yeah,
talking
that
about.
image there. So this was how complex it was for a while. This was super confusing. This is the
Yeah.
word for she in different regions of England.
And these almost follow the borders of different kingdoms of pre-Norman England, right? Like
Yeah.
Wessex
Yep.
over here. I'm forgetting the other ones, but they're a thing.
Yeah. It was East Anglia. You have Wessex and different places there.
Northumbria
So
up
yeah.
here.
So if you look right in the north there, you see this sko, or soul. That is that's where we get the modern word she from. So it's tempting if you're an American. Yeah, Wales was bigger, and they actually
Yeah.
when they spoke, it was its own thing
Right.
for a while. And some people say it still is its own thing. I'm not entering into that discussion. Um,
Yes. We will not discuss the varying degrees of autonomy and cultural heritage that the 7 different nations have kept. But I think if we're being fair, Wales and Cornwall are losing to Scotland and England, and Brittany is confusing to me. And we won't talk about Galicia because it's weird.
yeah. So the areas, so you see, so the she, the earlier forms of she, that word, really start in the north. And it was because in the north they borrow in the word for they, so that's cool because Vikings, and also you had all these Vikings in the north trying to pronounce the word heo, and they ended up just pronouncing it sheo or sho because it was much easier for them to say that. And then the rest of England's like, geez, these Vikings maybe have actually changed their language for the better because it's so much clearer to have distinctly different pronouns. He refers to a masculine person, singular. She refers to a feminine person, singular. And they refers to just a group of people out there together. Uh,
Yeah, that's very simple. I like it. It's very
yeah,
efficient. It's American in a way, I
it
would say.
is.
It's obviously pre-America, but
It is. But it's interesting because there were some holdouts as well, and you can see the holdouts regions here. It's very interesting. You had some holdout regions. You had areas where the word for she was still hey, or he even in some cases. And they just kept on doing the things that they were doing. But over time, what happened was, the northern forms of she and they spread to the south, and what's located in the southeastern part of England. Well, seats of
London,
power, London,
right?
right? And so London is a fascinating sort of, the London English is fascinating. Um, because London, as the Middle Ages, goes forward, and London grows in size and grows in political power and importance, and like
Right.
trade, mercantilism, all these things that are happening, right? Trade,
London and the city of London.
right? You get a lot of people moving to London, so the population of London itself grows, but then people are moving there, and they're bringing in whatever they said in their region, and all of a sudden they're having to learn essentially London English, but they change it as it goes. So so over time, this she and the they just become sort of the standard way of speaking English in London. And so it's this weird thing where the pronouns that start in the north get brought to the south and then get expanded outward through the English speaking world because of the importance of London.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I
So I know I
that
went
makes
into the
sense.
weeds there. Apologies, everyone. But like but so it's not that, again, if you're an American, particularly, so I'll speak as an American, you tend to think of, oh well, right, like London. That's where the king or the queen is. It must be. That's where everything comes from London. And London's a great place, but people there will also have this opinion. Everything that's good is from London, and we spread everything outwards from us. But in the
Yeah.
history of English language, it wasn't always that way, right? Oftentimes, you get dialect forms or words from other regions of England that are then brought to London and then sort of pushed back out across the language. So it's this kind of weird give and take thing. But that's pretty normal in the history of languages. Once you get urbanization, right? Like urban areas will always take things in, and then push stuff back out. You can see that in yes, well, I'm not making an argument that I think London's great. I don't know. I'm
I
partial
don't.
to my neck of the woods. So
I
that's
don't at all.
you don't. That's
London can
fine.
eat a whole bag of American dicks.
Well,
The
okay.
rest of England is okay. Wales, Scotland, and Ireland are obviously my favorite. Cornwall is a step above England, and that's how I feel. And the Isle of Man, it's fine. They're lucky I even brought them up.
I mean, I have no strong. It's not my fight, right? Like, it's not my fight. Yeah, I'm. My family was from part of my family is from Cheshire, and then part of my family were just crazy border Scots who were probably reavers who probably killed people and were transported to the New World, and we probably continued killing. We definitely continued killing people in the New World. If anyone knows about the history of border Scots,
Yeah, that's a thing.
absolutely insane people in my ancestry. So yes. Anywho, so yeah. It probably has.
London London has probably eaten a whole bag of dicks. Yes.
Let's see. Regardless of your opinion of London today, it wasn't always the number one seat of influence, and not that it necessarily is today. But it's tempting for us to read that onto the past. And so I guess if anything, if you get anything from this today, and again, apologies for going perhaps a little too linguist there. It's that
it's fine.
There's always a give and a take with urban areas, right? Like they do exert a lot of influence, but they also draw in influence from other places.
Yeah.
There's always this back and forth with urban locations, and I mean you can see this in America too, right? Like a lot of American, like a lot of the America's kind of strange because we have a lot of people, but we have really big cities and a lot of very rural places. We have this weird kind of
The European mind does not comprehend how large the United States is.
It's really weird because like you can go like on the West Coast in particular. So I'll bring it into the American context and into my context since it's the one I live in. So like on the West Coast, most people up and down the West Coast speak almost exactly the same. I don't want to say exactly the same, but almost exactly the same. In a previous live stream, we did look at Tom DeLonge's accent and sort of SoCal English and its interplay with Chicano Spanish speakers and all of that stuff. So
the diffusion of Chicano English through pop punk in the 1990s.
Yeah, something like that.
Insane the topics we cover here.
It is. But like, so if you want to think about like in the American context, what part of America has been English? What part of the contiguous United States has been English speaking the least? Well, the West Coast.
Right, the Southwest.
Well, yes, I guess. Yeah.
And I mean, even the rest of it, but they were Spanish speaking prior to the settlement of the state of Jefferson, which never came out, but Washington and Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to think about, I mean, I'm going to toot my own horn, Pacific Northwest, right? Like people have been only really, really speaking English as a dominant language here for like a little over 100 years.
Only that long?
Well, I guess
it was just Native Americans before that. It wasn't like a different European language,
maybe like
right?
150 years. Yeah, but I mean, like people weren't like, okay, there were some fur trappers and there's some English, there was some French, and there's some Spanish explorers doing things and trading to a certain extent out here.
And Russians.
There was no city of Seattle. There was no city of Portland. Like these were not like there right. There wasn't major metropolitan areas full of people speaking English. That just didn't exist. So like in the history of at least the Pacific Northwest, but really the West Coast in general, we have not been speaking English for that long, really. So what you get is a lot of people moving out here to where I am, not to where you are, from other parts of the world, but also just the English-speaking United States in particular. So you get this thing where like we haven't had that much time to develop a hyper specialized regional dialect. We do have regional features on the West Coast, but it's nothing like England was, as you can see on the picture here, in the Middle Ages.
Thanks, Siba. Thanks.
We haven't
like and subscribe, please, if you haven't. I forgot to say that so far. We're an hour in. Thank you. Sorry, continue.
No, you're good.
Content. I gotta do that. I forget.
Interrupt
sometimes.
me. Always interrupt. So we have not been speaking English really in America in general, but particularly in certain parts of America long enough to get this level of like where we would have a different. Now, so I guess I take, to a certain extent, we do have different regional pronouns in English, but we see it in our second person plural forms. So let me translate that into to normal speech, like a real person. Sorry. All of you are very kindly dealing with me today. This is what my wife has to deal with constantly, me spurging out about second person plural pronouns, and then she has to be like, well, what does that mean? Okay, so like you, Sam, so you're Connecticut, right? You
Yep.
were born, raised Connecticut?
Yep.
So you
Mostly.
have New England dialect, roughly speaking, Connecticut.
Yes.
Yeah. So how would you refer to, if you were talking to a group of friends, instead of listing all of their names, like
Yeah. You
Jim, John,
guys. It's
and
just you guys.
you guys? Interesting. We in the West have colonized you. We gotcha. Yeah, you guys. Interesting. You've been
Yeah.
sort of, you've had some weird kind of reverse cultural impact happening there. Um, that's fascinating. You speak a very standard American English. Yeah, to say you
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah. I
I would
moved
also
around a
say
little
you
bit
guys.
though, so I have some weird things in my language.
I would also say you guys. And to be fair, the you guys form doesn't originate from the West Coast, but it is very much the way West Coast people refer to a group of friends, would be you guys. And before people come at me, the word guys is not inherently gendered at all. It's
No, it's not gender to me
it's not
either.
a
I've
gendered
had
at
people like,
all.
not that I care, but people come at me like, "Oh, you're misgendering me because I said you guys," and I'm like, "No, I'm not." It's dude and guys are both like, he's a dude, she's a dude, we're all dudes. Yeah, like I
I
thought we
would
settled
say
this in the
that's interesting.
1990s.
I would say dude for me is still gendered as male, but guys is not. But you're a little
Yeah,
younger, so maybe
I
that
I
also
would say guys is more gendered male than dude.
really
Yeah. I
back.
mean, they're about the same, but I
So
think
yeah,
I think they're generally more male, but they can be used for both.
so so that's how you and I. So you and I, we I can hear your pronunciation is different than mine because of where you're from, but your pronoun usage is the same. That's interesting. That's something we share. I have a lot of my family is actually from Texas, so I'm actually a first gen. I'm a first gen Pacific Northwesterner, and
I'm
as
so
much as
sorry.
oh no,
No, I love Texas. I'm saying I'm sorry that you're there instead.
oh yeah, no, I'm a proud dual citizen with the Republic of Texas. I have a degree from a Texan university. Most people who've listened to this probably have figured out which one that is. A flagship Texan university
Oh, great.
involving horns. Um,
Oh, very, very ambivalent.
yeah, very
No one
ambivalent.
knows. Yeah.
Yeah, a famous actor likes to show up to the football games and is technically a coach now or something like that. I can't even remember.
Keanu Reeves?
No, McConaughey.
Oh, right. The other,
All
yeah,
right. Yeah,
that
yeah.
makes more sense. Right.
McConaughey. Yeah. So he drives through Austin in his commercials with his Buick or whatever it is.
It's a Lincoln.
It's a Lincoln.
Goddamn
Sorry,
Lincoln.
sorry, it's a Lincoln.
Close enough, almost,
Yeah,
I guess.
whatever. So I got family in Texas too. So not in the Austin area, but in North Texas. So and I was raised around Texan grandparents, and if I need to, I can code switch like no one's business. And if when I'm in Texas, sometimes if I go to a small town, I'll just start talking a little bit like this because I always get better service if I talk like this because I was raised around this way of talking. So like my grandparents growing up it was always y'all in the house, right? Like when I was over at my
Yeah.
grandparents' house, it was like a little small bit of Texas in the rural Pacific Northwest, which was great. Like all the food stuff, deviled eggs, all that stuff, it was very Texan. And so it was always y'all. So large parts of the United States will use y'all as the second person plural. Basically, South Midlands, so you get into like Oklahoma.
Oh, South Midlands. I immediately was thinking England, not the southern Midwest.
Yeah, hey, you guys. Yeah, anyhow. The Goonie reference there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I've never heard, like, I would say Midwest, not the Midlands. Obviously, it works, but like the South Midlands, I've
South
never heard
Midlands
that
is
used
yeah. So
for
you get into
America.
like Kansas. Well, I've heard people in Kansas use y'all. So I guess that does
Yeah,
Nebraska use y'all? Maybe I don't. I'm
it
not an
depends where
expert.
you are there, but yeah.
I'm not an expert on Nebraskan English.
But y'all has now been exported to a lot of the rest of the
Oh
U.S.
right. Okay. So let's say pre-internet use of y'all.
Okay,
Can
yeah.
we
Then
do
I
that?
don't know about Nebraska.
Yeah, yeah. The Gen Zs are like, what? A pre-internet usage of something? Yeah, before in the before times, it was you found a little bit more. You had a little bit more regional variation of this in the United States. Some parts of the Southwest would maybe use y'all. New Mexico to a certain extent, right? Maybe. Arizona, maybe, depending. Utah, maybe. Nevada, maybe. Definitely in Texas, yes, it's y'all. In the deep south, definitely yes, it's y'all. Florida is always a strange case in general because it's a wonderful, strange place.
Yeah.
Florida man is there. Sometimes he sounds southern, sometimes he doesn't,
Right.
depending on which Florida man you find.
But for the Europeans, the English and British that don't know, Florida is like it's the little peninsula at the bottom of the U.S., which you probably know. But what you might not know is that in Florida, what people say is the farther south you get, the more north it gets,
Yeah.
because like the north of Florida is very southern culturally, but the south of Florida is not. It has a lot of Cuban and other Spanish influences, and it's very much its own separate thing from the rest of the South.
Well, and South Florida also has more transplants. Is
Right,
from
right.
yeah,
Sorry. Yeah, that's the other
yeah.
part of it. It has Spanish culture, and it has a lot of people from the Northeast and the northern Midwest. And I'm from the Northeast. I'm from the farthest Northeast, which is New England, but the Northeast broadly includes a few other states.
So yeah, so so Florida's a kind of a strange case in general. It's a great place, but a strange place, all the same. And yes.
Yeah, Florida is basically a GTA server.
Yeah, effectively, yes. So you have like the part of the southern United States that's on the ocean, sort of what do they call that? I guess the tide. If you go up the Atlantic
Tidewater?
coast, tide. Yeah, if you go up the Atlantic coast, you'll still hear y'all. You'll still hear
Right.
y'all until you get to it's interesting because Virginia used to be sound more southern, and now the Virginia way of speaking has shifted quite drastically over
Right.
the past 100 years or so. Just because of
This right here at the south of, oh, I'm not sharing this
you're
tab.
still showing that. Yeah, here we go.
This right here, this big state, this is Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
This line right here is called the Mason-Dixon line, and this is where like the South traditionally begins. So these states here, Maryland, Delaware, West Virginia, these were border states. And it usually goes back to the Civil War here. So these states here, like this area is the Deep South. We're
Yeah.
talking Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
and parts of South Carolina. And then this is still the North. But once you get into Kentucky, West Virginia, Maryland, these are
Appalachia.
like right. This is
Yeah.
Appalachia right here.
Yeah.
This line, it goes northern
Well,
Alabama all the way up into Virginia.
and parts
The
of Ohio
Appalachian
too.
Mountains, they do go all the way into New England, but we don't consider it part of Appalachia
Parts
as a
of
region.
Ohio. I mean, if you've read J.D. Vance's book, you'll know that parts of Ohio are also pretty Appalachian adjacent at the bare minimum, if not outright Appalachian, right? So,
Yeah, and
yeah,
then when you're in northern Ohio, it's actually people from New England that settled this
yeah.
area. So
So if
northern
anyone here,
Ohio is it's very New
if
England
anyone
culturally.
if anyone here, he's great at Twitter, and I'm just a fan of his in general. If anyone here follows JD Vance on Twitter, the way or any of his talk, any of his news appearances, the way he just speaks his dialect. I love it because he doesn't he's very eloquent and very educated, but he has not changed the way he talks, and I think it's amazing.
That's good because
Yeah,
and this is something I have to explain to the British people as well, and other Europeans and anyone else who's here, and I don't know, maybe our Mexican friend D503 knows this more, but in the United States, Southern accents, regardless of what you do, in a lot of the rest of the country, they're associated with people being stupid,
yep.
which is not true. It's just
So,
bigotry.
so if I can tell an example from my family, so my dad was
Yeah,
raised in Texas and switched his accent in high school when he moved to Pacific Northwest and never really recovered it. And I don't
yeah,
know if that was, I don't think he felt bad about that really because he wasn't worried about identity politics 24/7. But part of me wonders like what I would have sounded like had my dad retained his accent.
yeah,
Because my
yeah.
grandparents were old enough when they moved from Texas to the Northwest that they didn't even bother because they couldn't even change it. Like they were
Right.
so locked into the Texan way of talking.
Right.
But
So
yeah,
people will change how they speak
yeah,
to fit in and for how people perceive them. And I personally, as somebody who loves culture, obviously, I think that's wrong in any case.
yeah. You should
Um,
speak how you want. Speak in the
yeah,
way that's natural to you, right?
yeah.
Like,
And
and I
certain
don't.
people will have associations with the way that you speak, but that's not real. That's
Yeah,
bullshit.
it
That's
is
on them.
bullshit. Yeah, it is on them. So speaking of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania is fascinating.
Yeah, the Welsh accent is something else. It really is.
I do like the Welsh accent.
I like it as well, but it's very
they talk
it's
tidy,
yeah.
talk tidy in Wales. I'm like, okay.
I also want to say something about this. In most of the world, like our soccer team, right? Even saying soccer is
Yeah,
something. But like we have like our soccer team is nicknamed the Yanks. But if you're in the United States, if you call me a Yankee, I'm like, yeah, I'm a Yankee. But I'm a Yankee because I'm from New England. Like in New England, people are
yeah.
Yankees. In the rest of the northern U.S., generally, yeah, Yankee. You won't
I'm
really
not a
use the
Yankee.
term.
I'm not a
But
Yankee.
but people in Washington,
Yeah,
even though it's the north of the country, that's not really the north.
no.
A Yankee really means someone from New England, maybe someone from New York,
Yeah,
Pennsylvania, New
my
Jersey, but that's pretty much it.
I'm a
It
mossback.
doesn't. You're a what?
A mossback
A mossback. Okay, I've never heard that.
because it's so rainy up here. We grow moss.
Oh, yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah,
We're
and there's
mossback.
rainforests in the
Yeah,
Pacific
we have a
Northwest.
literal rainforest. Yeah. So
But if you call if you're like English and you call someone from the South a Yankee, like they like it's probably less so now, but 30, 40 years ago, like someone might actually fight you. Like,
yeah,
and I'm not exaggerating.
that's
That's a
real.
huge insult for
Yeah.
them. I remember I met a woman from Texas on a cruise, and I told her that I was. They were asking where we were from. We were just talking to these three ladies, and one of them didn't like Northerners, which is not so much a thing anymore again. But in the South, like decades ago, it was very common for people in the South to not like people from the North, just in general, just as
Yeah.
a thing. And usually until like maybe they knew you and trusted you, but as a
Right.
baseline, they're not going to like you.
Yeah.
But this woman, like, I didn't mind. I thought it was funny, but she was like, they were asking where we were from. And she was from Texas. And, I told her, oh, we're from New England. And she went, huh, so you're Canadian. And I was like, nope,
Nope.
red-blooded American.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah. It depends. Yeah. It is a thing in certain places for sure. Yeah. Yankees, a gringo. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you Mexican as well? A Tungton?
Yeah.
Minoan?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Okay.
Minnesota's not a Yankee region at all.
No, it's
Not,
it's the
not,
Northeast, more specifically New England.
yeah. Pennsylvania, the state of Pennsylvania is really interesting because there's a part of, well, really, a lot of these regional forms kind of don't adhere to state boundaries because those are
Right.
largely artificial. But there's a Yinzer. I mean, I'm certain you know about Yinzers.
Right, and that's Pittsburgh. If we're talking like Pennsylvania, this is just like a map. You can see these cities here. Like this is empty space. This is a lot of
There's
farmland.
Amish.
Right.
They're not
it's a lot of
empty.
farmland. It's not a very dense area. Like Pennsylvania is basically split up into people that are in the Philadelphia area, and they
Yeah.
come from the culture of Philadelphia. And then Pittsburgh is its own culture, and they would, instead of saying you guys or y'all, they say yins, which is the weirdest thing. And
Well,
they have their own accent.
It's a contraction of you ones.
Oh God.
You ones. Like a plural one, like one but pluralized. So you ones, yins,
Yeah.
yins. And my understanding too is with that yins, the yins, as instead of you guys, is something that's not just in Pittsburgh. You do find it in parts of Ohio, obviously. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
they transcend state borders, right? This is
yeah,
Pittsburgh
exactly.
spreads out.
It also
Whereas Cleveland used to be owned by Connecticut. This area was owned by Connecticut, my state, for a long
interesting.
time. Until
I weirdly didn't know that, so thank you for
the
sharing.
New England states territory before these other states came about. New England colonies, actually. This is pre-states. They extended basically west indefinitely when they didn't even know exactly where the end was.
Well, and to bring it a little bit closer to Philadelphia, well, not Philadelphia itself, because you'll still hear something like yins in and around Philadelphia. At least I have.
In Philadelphia?
Well, it depends who you're talking to. Not in Philly itself, but like in that.
Oh.
Like. So that, well, did you watch that HBO show, Mayor of Easttown?
No.
Okay. So who was it? Yeah, anyhow, that show, it was an okay cop drama, but it's like shot, I forget where it is, somewhere in Delaware. Like it takes place in small town Delaware. and
Oh,
they actually
okay.
like had to spend a weirdly like large amount of time to get the actors to pronounce things correctly. And so they had
Okay.
like a local Delaware accent coach following them around on set and like had to keep correcting them because the vowel system in that part of the country is very, let's say, from a from a West Coast perspective, it seems strange, but actually it's really old. So people in and around like like the Delco accent is what they call it oftentimes. The Delco accent actually preserves a much earlier form of American English.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Um, so, and again, like New Jersey, what do people sound like in New Jersey? Well, it really depends where you are in New Jersey, right?
Right. Jersey ends up being split between North and South Jersey. Some people will say Central Jersey is a thing, but really it's South Jersey is mostly Philadelphia culturally, and
Well,
then North Jersey is mostly New York
right,
culturally.
right. So
And
it
it's the same thing with Eastern Connecticut being mostly New England culture, and then Western Connecticut being mostly New York culturally.
well, and thank you, Darren McKinney, because that the Yins thing in Pittsburgh lets you know that there was a decent amount of Irish immigration there,
Oh, does it? Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
Scotch Irish in particular because of the northern Irish versions of English that got brought then to the quote unquote New World and then develop in Pennsylvania. Yeah, so you
But
can
there
kind
was
of
also a lot of German immigration
German
in
as
this
well,
area,
but the
in the
Germans.
center and western Pennsylvania.
Right, but there was a they spoke German with themselves and learned the English learned English when they were talking to well, and I get right the Amish still call us the English, so that's
Right.
a very strange thing.
Which I hate that. I hate when anyone on the internet calls me an Anglo. It's like I'm not. I'm very literally not.
I'm Anglo American, if that works. I don't know. I mean, I'll own that.
No, I mean I'm not Anglo American.
No,
I
I
guess
know you're not.
culturally I'm somewhat Anglo American, but like it's like more than half of my blood is Irish.
I'm not
Love
touching
Notre
this with a
Dame.
10-foot cattle prod because
Yeah.
this is a whole other thing. I who gets to
Yeah.
be Anglo?
This question gets in the difference between what, rhotic and non-rhotic, or does that
Yeah,
not
so
apply
there's an
here?
intrusive R, so that worsh instead of wash. So that's an intrusive R thing that happens. Technically, that's called R hypercorrection, which is a whole thing. I don't know. We probably don't have time to get into that. But yes,
Okay.
the intrusive R can pop up in certain parts of American English, and that obviously that is not just an American thing. That happens in jolly old England as well,
Mm.
depending on where you are. It has to do with R. Um, it's not exactly the same thing, but an intrusive R can be heard in Boston as well. Um, so, well, you don't, well, Sam, you don't really have you don't have a Boston accent. So,
No. I
yeah,
live really close to Boston and Rhode Island, which have their own accents, but I don't have that accent. We don't. It doesn't extend that far.
yeah. Like, an example. So sometimes I'll give you an example from Boston, which, and I'm not a Bostonian. I'm not going to claim that. I'm just, this is something that you can hear, Matt Damon do this when he's like, Matt
Yeah.
Damon does this. Um, when Matt Damon is not being careful with his speech, you can hear him he has what's called a linking R. He'll introduce an R into a stream of sounds that really shouldn't, quote unquote, shouldn't be there, but it just is. This has to do with a thing that happens in some dialects. And so like, um, your ma is here. Like you say like that. Your ma is here, right? Your ma is here. Your ma is here. You hear they
God.
actually add an R into the ah, and it's because, like in some dialects like Boston, drop R's after vowels. And so because of they drop R's in some places, they add R's back in places that you would never expect them. And I do believe the worsh wash thing is kind of a somewhat similar phenomenon that can happen. Yeah. But it's ultimately probably a topic for another day. So
Okay.
yeah. Anywho, but yeah, yins. Some parts of America say yins, and so
Hard
any
R's.
hard
Sorry,
R's. Yeah,
yins. Yeah.
yeah. Are you a hard R? Are you a hard R Boston Irish or not? I don't know who gets to say that. Who knows?
Not me.
It's like that scene from Departed. I bet you changed your accent too. You did. Yeah, you went to Southie and sounded different. The bit where Marky Mark is shouting is
Yeah.
pretty great. Yeah.
For those that don't know, The Departed is one of many big Irish, Boston Irish movies.
As some linguists have pointed out, though, the it was only the actors who are actually from Boston who ever got the accent correct in the movie. The movie is wild, like it's a great film, but the accents are not to be trusted because you had a Alec Baldwin kind
Wait,
of.
am I getting an echo? I'm sorry. Has there been an echo this whole time and no one told me? I didn't ask, but
There
that's
might
not
be. I
good.
don't know.
And anyone else confirm that? I can screw with my audio settings. Is this better?
You're louder.
Am I? Is it
To
too
me.
loud? So someone tell me if the audio is okay in the comments, but just continue.
Yeah, no, like it's a great film, but not to be trusted in terms of accurate, because it's really like it's only like Matt Damon and Marky Mark who are really doing a truly good Boston accent in that movie because they actually know it. It's their native way of talking. So yeah, still a good movie though.
Yeah, I like that movie.
It's a good one.
Okay, I changed an audio setting on Doc's end as well, so it should be better now. If it's not, let me know. But yeah, go ahead, keep going.
So I guess to wrap it up a little, or to start wrapping up, it's not like
Yeah.
we don't have variation in pronoun usage in America. We do, but look at how long you have to drive or fly before somebody really starts using a different form for you guys. It's like you're having to travel sometimes thousands of miles before you really start hearing something different.
Right.
And it's because English hasn't been spoken in the United States as long as it has in England. Big shocker, right? Whereas in England, you'll have a lot more regional variation because people have just been there speaking the language for much longer. In the American context, though, look at the variation on the East Coast. The variation in dialects on the East Coast is a lot more than on the West Coast. Why? Because there's about 300 extra years of English on the East Coast as there is on the West Coast. So a lot of this, a lot of this has to do with time. How long has a language been spoken in a place? As a general rule, the longer a language has been spoken in a place, the more dialect variation you're going to get.
Right,
So,
and that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's a function of time. People in time, right? Languages in time equals language plus time equals variation, something like that. So, anywho, sorry to go into the weeds maybe a little too much on the pronouns. I just thought it would be interesting because it's where, there's a lot of talk about pronouns nowadays. And people tend to think that we can just pick and choose pronouns willy-nilly as if they're just unconnected to the history of where the language has been spoken. And that's just not accurate, right? Obviously, different dialects of English have a variation in pronouns. And sometimes we had some drastic variation. I mean, think about in the Middle Ages, those regions of England where the word for he, she, and they was all just hey. That would be weird for us to do that nowadays. But it's not like people were going like, I'm going to choose to use this pronoun. No, it's like that's how they spoke English in my hamlet, in my little town, in my little area. That's how we speak it. Maybe when they came to London, if they moved to London or to a larger city, they would be like, wow, all of a sudden I got to change the way I talk, but otherwise nobody knows what I'm saying.
Right.
But it's again, pronouns are a core part of English, have been for over 1,000 years, well over 1,000 years. And so through looking at pronoun differences, we can get a little sense of how much a non-English language, in this case Norse, Old Norse, spoken by the Danes, actually influenced modern English. As the Vikings learned English, they changed our language. And now, every time you say they or every time you say she, you're technically speaking English like a Viking would.
Yeah.
Which is cool. It's very
yeah,
Viking. It's very metal.
Cool. Yeah, and maybe
cool.
it would have done differently. Like, I think most people in the comments will know, but it's fine if you don't. Like, when the Norman invasion, Norman coming from Northmen, these are like Vikings, Scandinavians, essentially Danish, who settled in Normandy in the north of France and then invaded England. But what some Americans especially might not know is that King Harald Hardrada of Denmark invaded right before the Duke of Normandy invaded. And so if those invasions had happened in the opposite order, if the English army hadn't, or the Anglo-Saxon army hadn't been like
divided, well, they had to move really quickly.
They had to move really quickly. They had to go from one battle where they had high losses, beating the Vikings, and then fight the Normans. If they had fought the Normans first, it's possible they would have beat the Normans.
Yeah.
And then fought Harald Hardrada, and then Harald Hardrada might have won. And then maybe they would have lost to the Normans anyway. And then you'd maybe have the Normans fighting Harald Hardrada, and then Harald Hardrada wins. I don't know. It's one of those points in history where, like, alternative history used to be very popular. And that's one of those things where if you change one detail, if you delay Hardrada by 1 year, it
Yeah.
changes everything, and then there's 1,000 different ways you can go with it.
Oh yeah. And it would have definitely changed the way our English is spoken today. We would not be sounding the same in some alternate
Right.
multiverse. You and I are having this conversation talking about uh, our world as the counterfactual, right? Like
Or maybe the Spanish would have colonized farther north in the United States. Maybe the
maybe.
Spanish Armada doesn't happen and it changes things. I mean, who
Oh,
knows?
well, the Spanish Armada already didn't happen because God loves England. Anyway,
Right.
I got to get a
Right.
dig
Yes.
in there. My queen, who is always Elizabeth I, I love her.
Elizabeth I is also my favorite
I
monarch.
love her
She's
so much.
incredible.
Even though
Yeah.
she did kind of ruin your country, and apologies for that. I still, she did kind of ruin Ireland a bit, but I still really love her. So
there are worse figures in English history for Ireland.
well, we just celebrated a holiday that a certain figure in English history would have put you in jail for, who also killed a lot of Irish, and I'm thinking of Cromwell.
We do not speak of Cromwell's name. If I were outside, I would spit on the ground having said it. But yeah.
As I think I said on Twitter recently, every year we have to posthumously execute him around Christmas time. So,
but actually, where I'm from, we do there's a festival every year, a small festival where they symbolically carry a effigy of Benedict Arnold, who's a famous American trader from my home county. In Connecticut, and they symbolically carry an effigy of Benedict Arnold down the street in New London to the pier, and on the pier they remove his leg because he lost his leg in a battle at Saratoga, which is the only honorable part of that piece of scum, and then they burn it. And that's a thing we do today in 2024, which sounds crazy, but it's pretty cool.
Effigies is a thing.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, I don't care what happens to Benedict Arnold. There's also the Norwich Historical Society in my home county, which is very obsessed with the history of Benedict Arnold, which I think is disgusting and anti-American. And I think that the people in charge should lose their jobs and not be allowed to work in public history. It's an issue because I know them personally from work, but regardless of if I knew them or not, I would feel that way. Sorry, the Nugents and Phrygias, Acadian. Oh, these are just proper names. Acadian family from East Louisiana. So Acadians are French people from a specific region of France. There's also a population of Acadians in New England historically since the 1600s.
Yep.
Settled in Texas during before it's Six Flags. Six Flags in Texas refers to these Six Flags of different countries. It's like Texas, U.S., Confederacy, Mexico, and I'm forgetting the other two. Or France. Still there in Liberty on the Trinity. Yeah, thank you for the donation, Siba. Appreciate it. Yeah, Elizabeth I and John D are a great rabbit hole.
I've recently done if I can give a quick shout out, if I can, at the end here. Yeah, so if anyone here is a fan of Timeline Earth, I think our viewership's probably crossovers to a certain extent.
They do. I never talked to those guys, but they know my co-hosts on 5 Till Midnight, which is my other podcast,
that's the connection.
That. But yes, I'm aware of them.
If anyone knows Paz from TLE, Paz runs his own stuff too, part of the TLE family of podcasts called the Scarlet Thread Society. Everyone should check it out. Scarlet Thread Society is out for free. If anyone's interested, we do run a Patreon special. I come on once a month and talk about some spooky, strange, more like folklore mythology topic. And we did one all about John Dee and the British Empire and Elizabeth I and angels and demons and magic books and stuff. So I'll throw it out there as a
very cool. Yeah. That sounds interesting. I didn't know about that.
I recently did one for Christmas talking about the Icelandic Jólaköttur, the Yule cat of Iceland, which is a gigantic monster cat that will eat you if you don't get a piece of clothing for Christmas. So that's
don't get a piece of clothing like Dobby. Okay, sweet.
Yeah, you have to be Dobbied, and then you won't get eaten. So anyhow, I'll throw that out there. Yeah, I go far less into the language and more into the myth and folklore and stuff on that. But so I'll throw that out there. Cool.
You have anything else to go for?
If people are interested, it's difficult to know how many people actually find it because I think YouTube hates us. I do run my own. I have my own show called The Wandering Humanists on the YouTube, or as the Brits would say, YouTube. We have a couple of recent episodes up. One is on Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, recorded with my very English colleague Fred, which has been getting some good reviews. We're looking at Marxism and Dickens, and why Dickens is not a Marxist, even though the Marxists claim him continually.
Dude, the Marxists claim everybody. It's
I
crazy.
know he's not
It's
a
absolutely
Marxist.
crazy.
Yeah.
They were trying to. I was just talking to, and this episode is a live stream that's out. I was just talking to Amanda, who's a Machiavellian political science PhD student, and apparently they're trying to claim Machiavelli.
Oh Lord,
which is insane.
It is insane. That's so bizarre.
It's obviously like different Marxists that are claiming different people because they're as different as anything else. A lot of variation. But yeah, the Wandering Humanist. The Wandering Humanist is what Doc Brown goes by. His link to his Twitter is in the YouTube description if you want to look at it. Also, please like the video.
Yep.
I'd appreciate it. And the Patreon is $2 a month. There's an episode. It's early, unedited episodes, some extra bonus stuff. Lowest is $2 a month. You can check that out. That link is down below. And yeah, that's it. Anyone have any last questions before we go? Even if you asked it before and I didn't see it, lots of comments. And we can, as long as Doc Brown has a little time.
I got a little time. I guess my final statement will be, if you speak English, you speak the English of a Viking who poorly learned the language.
That's a good way to put it. We could have just said that and ended the live like 5 minutes in.
But then I can't talk for 20 minutes about pronouns. And then I can't frustrate you. So
yeah. Also, for anyone, this is a good point here. Doc Brown comes on all the time. He's my most common guest on live streams. And those are in general. I really just on the podcast, I really only have people on once, and if they want to come back, I just put them on a live stream. But you can find those episodes on the live tab on my profile. They're all on linguistics, different topics in linguistics. And we do this quite often.
It's fun. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Yeah, the bear that episode didn't get seen a lot, I think, because like the titling and it was very hard to
it's difficult
present what the episode was, even though the episode itself was very interesting.
Yeah, and I should have noted. I was thinking about this the other day because I was thinking about Arthurian romance. You know, that I didn't note it. I didn't say in that bear episode, but the name Arthur just means it's related to the word for bear. So even King Arthur himself has a bear name. Yeah, he's also a bear man.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. The bear is not something like I associate.
Beowulf also means bear.
So. Right. But isn't Arthur Brittonic, like Celtic?
Yes, but
legend?
Like if you think about in Greek, arctos is the word for bear. Arthur is like the Celtic equivalent of that. So it's the bear. It's the bear king. Yeah. There's all bear kings. Okay. Yeah. So he's big and strong like a bear. He's Arthur. Yeah. What's Alex Jones say? He's got hot blood moving through him fast. He's big like a bear. Hot blood moving through him fast. Yeah. Something like that.
Love that. Yeah. It just because it just keeps different connections just keep popping off, and I think they're cool. The national animals, or maybe it's not like officially national animals, but like symbols of the different countries of the UK is so cool to me. Like Wales is obviously a dragon, and then Scotland is a unicorn, and then England is a dragon, right? No, a lion. Right?
Lion, yeah. Lion. Although you got St. George killing the dragon, and he's the national saint, so of England. So
I didn't know that. That's very cool. I speak the English of an English who poorly learned the language.
Yes.
All right. We have Northerners in the comments. Sorry. Love you guys.
but I guess the a little bit more cogent or salient point is that the English we speak now is the correct language because it's how the language changed. But the language was heavily influenced by contact over time. Yeah. So
George and the Dragon, the Welsh woman is saying, let's not talk about George and the Dragon.
Yes.
Is this something to do with England slaying Wales? Is this symbology? Does that what that means? Wales has a different version.
Yeah.
Is that what it is? Like, because obviously the dragon is.
I'll let the Welsh will speak for themselves. I won't speak for them. I'll sit my white ass down and shut up.
Yeah. St. George wasn't English. Yeah.
No, he
St.
was
Patrick
not.
wasn't Irish, right?
Yeah, I mean, national saints don't have to be from that nation. That's
Yeah, it's pretty common,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, our like in America, like the father of the American Navy, and for those of you who don't know, I mean, I'm a U.S. Marine, which we're like part of the we're not the U.S. Navy, but we're part of the naval tradition. We're part of the Department of the Navy, and like the father of the U.S. Navy, John Paul Jones, was a Scotsman.
Yeah, Scottish. I have
Father of the
not yet
American
begun to fight.
Cavalry. They share the father of the American Cavalry. It's shared by a Pole and a Hungarian. Father of the American Infantry is Prussian. I think I covered all of them there. The father of the American Space Force is
Yeah, I was gonna say, what about Space
Donald
Force?
Trump.
What about the Space Force? Yeah.
Yeah, and this is something we say, the men's department of the Navy. Yeah. Everyone here calls each other's groups sheep shaggers, but I think we're all sheep shaggers worldwide. All right.
Is it a hard R sheep shagger or
a sheep shagger, not a sheep
yeah, I
shagger?
mean, yeah.
Santa Claus / Saint Nicholas was Turkish or Greek?
No, he was Greek. He was Greek, not
the
Turkish.
thing with
not
like
Turkish.
We have one Turk in the
Not
comments,
Turkish.
right? What Turkish and Greek people will not be very happy about is that genetically a lot of Greeks are Turks and a lot of Turks are Greeks.
Yeah.
When they get their genetic test back, and it's because I mean the Greeks were in
the Eastern Mediterranean, everyone's going around. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of shared genetic material. Yeah. Just like, dare I say, between your people and my people, Sam, there's a lot of shared genetic material between the English and the Irish as well. So I hate to
I was talking about Ermish. I didn't know you were Turkish as well. Welcome.
Yeah.
They call us Mongolians. Yeah, I'm Irish Hungarian ethnically. And yeah, I make lots of jokes like that as well, that we're Mongolians. Yeah, maybe I'll see you at
you fought against the Mongolians.
Yes, but the people that founded Hungary,
Magyars, well, they were not Mongolian, but that's
no, they weren't Mongolian, but they were steppe people.
Steppe people. Lots of cultural similarities for sure.
Right, similar to the original Turks.
Yeah, you're very shamanic.
Right.
Yeah.
Highlanders and Welsh. Yeah, I would call people generally when I think of a sheep shagger, I'm thinking of someone from Wales or usually someone from Scotland or New Zealand, but also someone from Wales. I thank you for another donation, Sia, but very generous. Talmadge, Washington, John Jay, and Ben Franklin. They are the fathers of military intelligence. Also, Army here, 1776 only exists because of 1775. For those who don't know what that means, is 1776 is the start of the country, but 1775 is the start of the actual military rebellion. So
yeah, it started much earlier. Well, yeah, and it was weirdly diffused too, like in the frontier areas too. People were like fighting kind of their own wars somewhat independently. It's kind of crazy. Yeah.
Right. Because it wasn't a unified thing. It was different rebellions in different areas for different reasons with different leaders. And I would make connections to Star Wars with that, but I can't do that. Carry on ripping into me. I'm sorry. Look, we love Wales here. Okay, we love Wales. But we gotta have a little rivalry.
At least kayfabe, right? You gotta lean into it.
Of course. Yes. Yeah, there was a large budget on intelligence even during the revolution. And now American intelligence is heavily disproportionately Mormon for some reason. Do with that what you will.
Oh, that makes perfect. Actually, that things are aligning in my head right now. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And the Mormons, Church of Latter-day Saints, you probably don't know about them if you're outside the U.S. besides a few things, but they're different.
That is a way to describe. Yes.
Yeah, different. It's I went to Mormon church once. I had a Marine that invited me to Mormon church, and I went there, and I enjoyed myself. Everyone was very nice, but they also, I had never heard of this stereotype about Mormons that they were polygamous. But everybody I talked to independently kept telling me they weren't polygamist, and I left, and I was like, these people are fucking polygamous.
Because they kept saying they weren't. Yeah.
They just kept saying they weren't. It's like, I never thought you were. I've never heard this. Apparently, it's a commonly known stereotype of them because they were in the past. But like, they're a lot of them aren't now. Some of them are. It's weird. Yeah. Apparently, the UK Army is quitting them out. I haven't heard about it.
I heard something about that even today.
The U.S. military is having a crisis of recruitment.
A crisis in general, maybe.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, it's almost like when you treat them poorly, people don't want to stay in. I mean, I'm from a military family, and I would hate for my children to join. I would absolutely not want that at this point, unless things change by the time I have children and they grow to be that age. All right. Anything else?
No, it's just thanks for letting me come on. And yeah, our pronouns reflect the Vikings. There you go. That's it.
Yeah, we're just the entire time we've been out here, we've had more and more viewers come in, so we're actually going to stop it at the point where we had the most viewers, which is unfortunate.
Que lastima. Oh well. Hello.
But that's all right. I might go live again later because I'm not doing much else, and I'm like a week out from my next release of an episode. That episode is available on Patreon already in a longer version. It's an interview with a professor from the University of Bergen in Norway.
Bergen,
yeah.
Bergen. Yeah,
tried my best to get the right pronunciation, but that's all you're going to get out of me. And that's a great episode, very long. He also he's Austrian originally, and he has this huge collection of postcards from his grandfather, who was a soldier in the Wehrmacht who survived the Eastern Front.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know. It's insane. Yeah. Right. And he knew some stuff about that, but also, like, I'm sure he doesn't know everything. I can only imagine the terrible things going on. Yeah. And I'm assuming that this is Welsh because it looks almost like Irish. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. The only phrases I know in Irish are like sláinte and Shakiar Law and freaking like they're all just rebel phrases.
Yeah,
nothing real. What's the other one? Shakiar Law and Aaron Go Brach.
Yeah,
Go Bra or Go Brach?
I don't. I'm not a Celtic expert, so
neither am I. I'm assuming this is Turkish.
That looks Turkish to me.
It does look Turkish. Ramayadayam. Ama Simdi Ramanyadayam. Probably mispronounced that. I should just like have people just write in different languages and see if I can pronounce them. Some I can do better than others.
You know, that might be fun. This is just an idea. This could is bring me on and we'll do a live reading of something in a dead language.
Oh, we should do that. That'd be cool.
Line by line. Might be fun. I could set you up that like in a jiffy because I've taught courses. I got all this material ready to go. If you ever wanted to. I don't know if people would find that interesting. It might be boring, but
we can try it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I could try it.
Yeah. And also where's Siba? Me and the other Dan need to begin the planning Yucatan 2026 expedition. I'm not sure if I'm ready to do that, but I would love to organize a Yucatan trip for the show. I know other people have done it. Like some of my colleagues, people I'm like in circles with, like Luke Caverns, Wandering Wolf. They've done these trips. So it'd be great to go to Yucatan. I'd love to, but what Siba is talking about right now is in actually I'll share this tab again for a moment. So down here, not in Yucatan, it's in this is Yucatan, the state of Yucatan, and these right here are Mayan lands. They go into Guatemala, Belize, a little bit into Honduras, and a little bit into El Salvador, I think. But like this area is like the Mayan heartland. There's, culturally very different. But over here, not in Yucatan itself, but this is all in U.S. geography. We would call all of this the Yucatan Peninsula. But this is Quintana Roo in Campeche. If I mispronounce that, Mexicans, please help me. But they're in Campeche. either I think over here, 15 miles, like 35 kilometers off of this main road, there was a somewhere over here, I think, or it's over this one, but I think it's this one. There was a Mayan city that was found like just with GPR, just with satellites, and it would be very cool to go see it. Apparently, nobody's been there. That's what the archaeologists say. But I assume that local people have been there, but that knowledge doesn't always reach Western academia, and then they assume no one's been there since they haven't heard about it. It's not written about. But if you go to any, like I've been in these Mayan lands, and this is true in different places. If you go to these places and you just talk to a cab driver or you talk to a bartender and you ask them about, like, are there ruins anywhere? Like, there are ruins. There are small ruins. There are small, like, ancient sites that exist that are possibly not known either through, they're not known to the West, either just through like nobody asking or telling them about it, or, and this is actually much more common than you think in a lot of countries based on the different laws, that people don't want to make it known that they have one on their land because of government policies to then take that land.
You just take the land. Yeah.
Which is very unfortunate. And sometimes they'll even be destroyed. And I can't source on this. Like, go talk to a real person and stop looking in books. This is a real thing. If you talk to people, you will hear about it.
Something maybe not so drastic, but somewhat similar actually happens in Germany. And I know that from personal.
This isn't just outside of the West. Mexico is part of the West, I would say. But like, it's not just outside of the United States, Europe, Canada. It's everywhere that this happens.
Yep.
But go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, that was I just said I was just said you could do a whole Werner Herzog and you could be traipsing through the jungle and talking about the vile murder. There's murder in the jungle. You could have Klaus Kinski, trying to shoot people on set, if you know that famous documentary.
Yeah.
Whenever people traipse through jungles, I just start thinking of Werner Herzog in the jungle. So.
Yeah. I always think of the Lost City of Z.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I'm ever out at Teotihuacan, that's Teotihuacan, I think is right. If I'm ever out, Mexico City is where that's near, right? I haven't been to that part of Mexico just because I mostly go to the Mayan parts. I've been to Yucatan, Quintana Roo, and Cozumel. But if I am, I'll let you know. I'm sure I'll announce that I'm going there before I actually do.
I've only ever really been near like the border regions, which is kind of dicey. So I need to see another part of Mexico.
Wait, where have you been?
Oh, like Tijuana, Ensenada.
Tijuana, yeah. And I've talked about this on the channel before. The different states of Mexico have massively.
That's not the whole country, but yeah, that's my experience there. Like, whoa.
Right. Yeah. They have massively different areas, or they have massively different rates of crime in different parts of Mexico. Like Yucatan is one of the safest. It's if you're in Yucatan, you're safer than most places in America, at least urban areas.
Yeah.
But if you're in somewhere else, if you're in Baja California Sur, not Baja California, but Baja California Sur, Sinaloa, you're in some of these other states, it's not safe.
Yeah,
not safe. Very, very different. Okay. All right, we're gonna get out of here, guys. See you, but thank you for the support. Check out the Patreon, check out Doc Brown's Twitter, and some of the other episodes, the live streams with Doc Brown, all on different topics.
Yes.
That one that was the least watched one that we've done. That's my favorite one.
The Bear Wolf one, yeah.
I just couldn't figure out how to put it in a way.
It's hard to brand.
Like it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's a limitation of the platform. All right. Bye, everybody.